Hello and welcome back to the channel. I hope you're all looking forward to some time off for the holidays. I think you can probably tell that I am. If this is your first time here, my name is Gerard LeConte, and every Sunday morning I catch you up to speed on something that has caught my attention and compelled me to dig into it further, usually something to do with American politics or government. This week, it's the Senate elections in Georgia happening next month, the runoff election between GOP incumbent David Perdue and the Democratic challenger Jon Ossoff, as well as the special election between appointed incumbent Kelly Loeffler and Democratic challenger Raphael Warnock. This is one of the most consequential elections in recent memory because it will effectively decide the power balance in government for at least the next 2 years. If Democrats win both seats, then they will have the majority in the Senate, which combined with their House majority and Joe Biden winning the White House gives Democrats unified government for the first time since 2011. So we're going to talk about what it will mean for Democrats to have unified government or not, the state of each race, and how each party hopes to win them. And finally, you'll get my take on the whole situation. So stick around and make sure to subscribe if this is the kind of content that you enjoy. First off, what's the difference between Democrats and Republicans controlling the Senate? If Republicans hold on to their majority, the biggest fear is that Mitch McConnell will once again resume the strategy he used against Obama, which is absolute obstruction. In 2010, leading up to Obama's first midterm elections, McConnell famously said in an interview with the National Journal, "The single most important thing we want to achieve is for President Obama to be a one-term president." Going on to add, if he's willing to meet us halfway on some of the biggest issues, it's not inappropriate for us to do business with him. However, if you ask most liberals, Obama went more than halfway plenty of times, and McConnell stonewalled him anyway. This is most evident when it came to the judiciary, and McConnell will readily admit that.
I was shocked that former President Obama left so many vacancies and didn't try to fill those positions.
I'll tell you why. I was in charge of what we did the last 2 years of the Obama administration.
I will give you full credit for that. And by the way, take a bow. All right, that was a good line.
He's not wrong, though. Obama left office with 88 judicial vacancies, which is double the vacancies left when Obama took office. McConnell did everything that he could to block Obama's ability to seat judges, most notably refusing to even give Merrick Garland, Obama's nominee to fill Antonin Scalia's seat on the Supreme Court, a vote. This was unprecedented, and it's the most likely consequence of Republicans holding onto the Senate this time around. Biden is a little bit more well-versed in how the sausage is made on the Hill than Obama was, and he's more comfortable with certain forms of negotiation than Obama was. Obama always had a really hard time with concessions that he sincerely thought made the policy worse, which I completely empathize with, by the way. It's extremely frustrating to make concessions that don't make sense to you or actively harm the policy that you're negotiating for. But I don't think Biden has the same expectations for negotiations to be based on his logic or reason. Biden knows full well that people in Congress will make demands that they know will make government less effective if they think it wins them votes. And if you're a Republican, few things win you more votes than making government less effective. Frankly, I also think that Republican senators will be more willing to let an old white guy have success in the White House than they and the people who voted for them were with Obama. But still, I expect to see Biden subjected to very similar obstructionism when it comes to the judiciary that Obama saw. McConnell might not baldly block SCOTUS nominees, but that wouldn't surprise me either. Either way, he'll seat as few federal judges as he possibly can. If Democrats hope to even start reversing the extreme ideological shift that McConnell installed under Trump, they have to win the Senate, and that in of itself should be enough to turn out Democrats. But there are plenty of kitchen table implications if Democrats take the Senate as well, and we're experiencing them right now. Here's an unavoidable truth about the state of American politics. Americans would not be waiting around for financial assistance during this pandemic if Ossoff and Warnock were in the Senate already. Republicans have been putting barrier after barrier in front of pandemic relief negotiations, running Democrats in circles around nonsense like state and local tax relief and business liability protections in order to obfuscate the fact that they simply don't want to pass pandemic relief. It's gotten to the point where Republicans recently pulled out of thin air a requirement that pandemic relief carry with it restrictions on the Federal Reserve from using the same tools with Biden that they already have with Trump to keep the economy stable during the pandemic. And this drills down to the root of the necessity of Democrats taking the Senate. If Congress passes this relief, or if the Federal Reserve has access to the same tools when Biden is president 50% as they have with Trump as president, then Biden might have a fast economic recovery, and Republican senators are much more willing to let Americans go broke or die during a pandemic than they are to let a Democrat be president during a good economy. When voters are deciding between a Republican or a Democratic-controlled Senate, they aren't deciding between moderation and an unchecked radical left. A democratically controlled Senate will still have plenty of moderate, if not conservative, Democrats to check the left, namely Ossoff and Warnock themselves. But you also have the likes of Joe Manchin, Kyrsten Sinema, Mark Kelly. They're not going to vote on things that they think are so far left that it causes them electoral problems. Instead, voters are deciding on a Senate that works or one that doesn't. One that votes on bills more than just tax breaks. One that fulfills its basic function to provide advice and consent. Multiple candidates ran for both seats in November, but no one hit 50%. And in Georgia, as well as Louisiana, if no one gets 50% in the general election, then the top two candidates go to a runoff. David Perdue got close with 49.7% of the vote to Ossoff's 47.9% of the vote, edging him out by about 90,000 votes. The third-party candidate there received 2.3%. The special election was much more split, with two well-known Republicans but no traditional incumbents running. The combined Republican vote in that race was 49.3%, while the combined Democratic vote was 48.4%. The third-party vote accounted for 2.3%. So you have two very close races, and both the third party eclipsed the margin between the two major party candidates. Polling aggregators are starting to release averages for both races, and before you start freaking out over the polling, Georgia polling really wasn't that bad in November. Most of the averages, at least the ones that I pay attention to, were within 1% of the final result, so I don't see much harm at looking at them for this runoff. That being said, both races are toss-ups, oscillating between each candidate being ahead by a point or two. So it won't be rocket science. It's going to come down to turnout and flipping as many third-party voters as possible. Democrats have had an interesting and sort of new strategy for that. Over most of my lifetime, we've seen the Democratic strategy in the South be to trot out candidates that look sort of like Republicans, old white men that are more conservative than their peers. Stacey Abrams famously challenged this approach and has since been a vocal opponent of it, and it seems like Georgia Democrats are listening. Warnock is a black progressive senior pastor of Ebenezer, the church led by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and Ossoff is a Jewish millennial. Neither of them are typical. Instead of being worried about offending the sensibilities of white conservatives who make up the majority of the state, 30% of which they probably need in order to be victorious, they've presented two candidates steeped in traditional Democratic sensibilities. Warnock already carries the civil rights credentials of being the spiritual descendant of Dr. King, and Ossoff carries the endorsements of Hank Johnson and the late John Lewis. While listening to Ossoff on the stump, you'll learn that he comes from a family that lived in public housing when he was young and that he relied on Pell Grants to get himself through college. You'll hear both candidates endorse Medicaid expansion, marijuana decriminalization, and student debt relief. However, you won't hear things like Medicare for all or reparations. The strategy is pretty clear here. Identify with and connect with black voters and liberal white voters while fending off claims of radicalism. Educate those voters on the candidates and mobilize them. On the other side of the aisle, there's been less innovation. Loeffler and Perdue have spent most of their time slandering Ossoff and Warnock as radical socialist Marxists in an attempt to scare conservative white voters, while the party tries to erect as many barriers to the polls for traditional Democratic voters, aka black voters, as they can. Do I think Ossoff and Warnock can pull it off? If I were to put money on it right now, I would probably say that they don't, unfortunately. So far, the GOP is outraising the DNC 4-1, and polling indicates that the GOP still has an edge in voter enthusiasm. That being said, if you gave either of those Democrats even a point on those odds, I'm probably pulling my money. I definitely think the Republican candidates are vulnerable. Loeffler even more than Perdue, mostly because she was never voted in to begin with. Both candidates chased Trump's base during the general, Loeffler going as far as aligning herself with QAnon candidates. Does that push away moderate voters? Both Loeffler and Perdue are extremely wealthy, and both have been embroiled in multiple controversies around shady stock trading, appearing to have knowingly profited off the pandemic. Does that alienate voters? Furthermore, Donald Trump and his zealots have been doing everything that they can to convince the voters of Georgia that the November election was illegitimate, and 55% of Trump voters in Georgia still believe that he rightfully won. Does the reduced confidence in the election depress turnout? I believe in Abrams' strategy, so I think that this is a legitimate toss-up. But what do you think? Tell me your predictions for the race down in the comments. Also, what implications do you think that this has for American electoral politics overall? With Virginia recently turning blue, Biden winning Georgia, and North Carolina being so close, does the South present a potential opportunity for Democrats and liability for Republicans? One thing is for sure, if you want Democrats to take the Senate, you should absolutely be sending money to Georgia right now. As always, thanks for watching. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and share it with your friends if you liked it. Also, subscribe to the channel. Have a great week, and we'll see you next Sunday.